What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for another week of building Coruscant in Lego. This week I am officially starting the second section of the MOC. So for those of you guys who don't know, I've split this MOC into 3 sections. I've been working on the first section. It's pretty much done, so now it's time to lay the foundation for the structures and buildings that will be in the next section. So I'm going to be showing you guys what I have planned for the food court / mall area and what kind of interior and details are going to go into that, as well as explaining more about the skybridge. I left you guys on a little bit of a cliffhanger with that last week. And then of course I've got some smaller builds and sections that I will be finishing up. It's going to be a great update, lots of building, you guys know the drill. Don't forget to execute order 66 on that like button, and let's get started. Let's start this week by looking at the apartment complex roof. I finished a large chunk of it on a live stream last week, and now I'm going to finish up the front. Really the only 2 things I want to mention on the section I already built are the little maintenance ladder I put on the side. This is just to add some detail to the structure and so that workers can get up on the roof. Second, I mirrored the jog in this little structure / pop out on the second layer by combining a bunch of 2x2 and 3x3 wedge plates, so it creates the same general shape as the bottom, but there are some gaps between the 2 plates, so that's why it looks a little weird, but I think it's kind of a cool look. The front section is going to be a power center of sorts. You can see a set of pipes running toward this pop-up, and I want them to connect to the front wall and into some kind of power generator that will sit on top of the roof. Originally, I was going to have the pipes running up the front of the build and connect to the generator externally, but I just didn't have the right pipe lengths for that, so they just run into the front of the wall and connect in there somewhere. Next, it's time to build the second story of the pop-up, and then plate and tile it off. So let's figure out what's going down this week. I was able to finish off this pop-up structure right here. I added this little turbine because I wanted it to look like, this is some kind of power, wind, electrical, I don't care, some kind of power generator. And then you can see this, it's feeding these pipes that go down here and then disperse, into the building, off into the city and power other stuff. It's just a little bit of kind of like world building, if you will, for this MOC. And then here's another look at that little maintenance ladder I got on the side. I really like building small details like this that don't really mean much to the main story, but just help paint a better picture of the world overall. Kind of like this little maintenance area over here. But other than that, I was able to get a lot of stuff tiled off. I really want to get this section done as fast as I can, so I've just been going through and finishing up and fixing areas. I finished off this, tiled off the last panel for this skyscraper, so now this whole section's done, and you can see it's really just this side that needs to be finished for this structure. Everything over here is done. There was one thing I wanted to talk about that I forgot to mention last week, and that is this area right here. So you can see it's very congested and crowded right here, and there's almost no space between these 2 skyscrapers. You can see this foundational support is practically touching this one, so I may have to scoot that building back that direction a little bit. But I'm just really excited to get this whole section done and finally see, like, what does this look like? What did my vision amount to? Because this section is going to be very reminiscent of what this section and this section look like. So if I can, achieve what I want here, I'll know better what to do moving forward. But speaking of these sections next, I finally decided when and where I'm moving to after this section is done. I feel like this is the last week that I can focus on this section. There's still things that need to be done, but I just don't have enough to give you guys good updates with only working on over here. It's time to move on and start this second section. I decided not to go with the Galactic Senate building next, just because of how big and how expensive it's going to be, and I'm on a pretty tight budget right now, and I'm hoping to save that for, next year when hopefully the channel's bigger, pulling in more views, making more money, stuff like that, and I can pour a lot more into it. Whereas these sections I have a lot of the foundation parts for, so I can start it without breaking the bank. I'm going to have a huge food court area that's going to be full of interior. So everybody who's been wanting interiors, side stories, Coruscant world building, this is where it's going to be. We're going to have Arabish like texts, we're going to have billboards, we're going to have lights, we're going to have multiple levels of dining, of entertainment, fountain, food court, all kinds of cool stuff. We're going to have another skybridge section. So this over here is going to be almost like an entire MOC in and of itself. This second section is probably just going to be a smaller version of this. Another thing that factored into this was a huge section of this Galactic Senate building is going to be a huge plateau / just walkway area. So I have a little bit of a buffer between these 2 sections where I can shrink or lengthen that front walkway without affecting the build of the Galactic Senate building too much or what's going on over here. But before I get started on this, I have some business to attend to with this skybridge, kind of explaining my vision. I left you guys on a little bit of a cliffhanger with what's going to happen to it, and then I have another thing I got to do for the clone base. It's time for the skybridge to enter its final form. I'm leaving the main design the same. The only thing I'm adding are some light bluish gray bricks at the rear of the bridge. This is what's going to connect it to the apartment complex and block up any gaps between the bridge and the wall. And I'm also going to add a row of dark bluish gray plate across the bottom of this to balance out and match the row of dark bluish gray brick on top. On the other end of the bridge, I'm going to add a bunch of plate sticking out at different lengths to make it look like the bridge was ripped in half. I'm also going to add a bunch of smaller trans-clear parts to make it look like something smashed through them. I think all the lines and visible studs in the glass wall make even more sense now because it looks like the whole thing has been cracked or shattered by a massive hit. This end will be added to and changed over time, but I wanted to build a rough idea of what I wanted it to look like so you could all see my vision and idea for this. In a bit, I will explain what caused all of this damage. Just when you thought you would never see the clone base again, I am returning to finish the inside of the barracks. All I need to add are the rest of the bunk beds and some tile and plate on the floor. This isn't a huge leap in progress for the mock, but it is a nice thing to check off on the mental checklist of what needs to be done, especially because there are so many little builds like this that don't need to be finished right away, but keep adding up. And I don't want to finish the mock and have to go back and finish a million different things. Now that the first section is in order, it's time to start laying out the foundations of the next one. This is always stressful for me because I have to pick the perfect size for the base because once the walls and interior are in, I can't move it. This particular building will be the mall or entertainment center. I need to put it far enough away from the finished section so I can fit in the skybridge between the two buildings, but I need to leave enough space for the Galactic Senate building and plaza in front of it on the other side. So before I started building, I counted out studs and measured everything to make sure I had enough room for all the buildings, roads, and everything that will be on this side, while still making sure this building will be big enough to look realistic. This is why I tend to put off and have a hard time starting this period of the building series because it's not super fun or exciting, and if I get it wrong, it'll mess up the rest of the mock. Alright, let's see how everything is coming together. So, the final installment of the skybridge has finally been put in. It now fits seamlessly into the apartment complex wall. There are no gaps anywhere. Everything is nice and sturdy. Very happy with the design. On the front here, the broken section turned out pretty good. I'm still adjusting the glass pieces a little bit here and there, but all this can be changed as I go, so I'm pretty happy with it now. What I wanted to do with this skybridge is actually have it broken. As I was building it, I thought instead of building the whole thing, it would be cool to have just half of it because I was starting to build it and one side was kind of jagged and broken, and that just made me think, oh, I want it to look like that when it's finished. So what I decided is going to happen is we're going to have a vulture droid that kind of got shot, hit, I don't know, whatever, but flew down, broke through the skybridge, and then crashed down here either on the road or in the sidewalk or in the wall here. I'm not too sure where I want it to go, but basically just sheared off, but basically just busted a hole in the skybridge. So the other half, it's going to be a lot shorter. It'll probably only be about that long, but it'll be connected to this wall. Then there'll be this gap. So that's what all of the damage is for. But I like it. I think this is a really cool idea, and I think it'll be even more interesting than just having the finished skybridge. And then real quick, here's a look at the barracks. I tiled off the entire rest of the floor, got the other 3 bunk beds in. So happy to have this interior done, but nothing too crazy there. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is this next section of the build. So I started designing the food court section next, just because I wanted to see if this chunk of the skybridge was too long, because I obviously need to have some kind of a chunk right here, and I was worried that this part would be jutting too far out. But I'm thinking if I make the other section about this long, I should be pretty good. You can see this section will be much smaller, but you know, this break doesn't have to be in the exact center of the skybridge. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough room to at least build a little chunk on this side. You guys saw a lot of this coming together. It's pretty simple, pretty much the same exact foundation as this piece and this piece. But now that I have it mapped out, I can kind of show you guys what I want this to look like. So it's going to be a giant U. So we're going to have a wall running along this section. It's going to turn the corner right here. There's going to be a big archway and entrance right here in the middle, and then it's going to continue on this way with another wall right here, and then, you know, the sky bridge will be up over here and connect into that. And then in the center here, there's going to be like a little courtyard with a fountain, some tables, and then there are going to be a lot of stories, a lot of interior building going on in here. So that's why I figured, you know, even though I wouldn't be able to start the Senate building, you guys would still really like this section, because there's going to be a lot of little builds, a lot of storytelling going on, and I want to have like advertisements in Arabic, so I'm going to try and figure out how to make that. Did get a little bit of the sidewalk put in, but I realized this might be where the vulture droid ends up, so I might have to break some of this up, but I'll save all that for next week. I'm really happy to finally be starting on this next section, especially this one. And now it's time to figure out what's going to be going down next week. I am really glad I'm finally starting the next section. I was a little hesitant too, but this week as I was building, I realized I just don't have very much left to do on the first section. Like, I knew like this update could not be a full satisfying update with just what I had left. So it'll be nice to start building over there. Unfortunately, that means I am going to need to order in a bunch more plate, because I have eaten through pretty much all my plate from Naboo, Umbara, Cato Nemoidia, and I'm saving as much of the Utpal plate as I can for side builds and other mock videos, so I'm gonna have to order a new plate for the first time in years. But that's what happens when every mock you build is bigger than the last one. Next week, I want to get some walls up on the food court / mall section and figure out a better name for it. I don't like calling it food court, just makes it sound kind of tacky and weird. And then I also want to add in the battle damage, or at least start to add in the battle damage where the vulture droid is crashed into the ground. And talking about a big problem I just barely realized in this update, having to do with the road and the Galactic Senate building. So all that and more next week. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about this update down below in the comments, and I'll catch you guys next time. But until then, happy building.